Doug Edwards, you got a brilliant first name. Doug Edwards, you are the CEO of Smarty, based in Provo, Utah, which can be found at smarty.com. Welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you.
So tell us.
Actually, I'm the president and COO of the organization.
President and COO. That's right, because your founder is the CEO. Yeah,
correct.
I don't want to offend him.
Yeah, nor do I.
There you go. All right. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background, which is so fascinating, and then we'll talk a little bit about Smarty and see where we go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I grew up in a military family and spent all of my growing up years with my father in the military. He was a colonel in the Army and was a hospital administrator. And so we had a number of very, very good situations where we lived. It was a great upbringing. I loved it, even moving every 1 to 3 years of my life and having to start over. I think it was a great foundation for me in my life, and especially going into business, getting to know people and using those skills. And then ended up just kind of moseying on into college, and the rest kind of took care of itself. It's interesting how my life has played out. Yeah, I ended up did serving a mission for my church at a young age, and that took me to Hong Kong, where I spoke Chinese for a couple of years, and then that opened up doors for me. That it's interesting when you have to spend so much time with such a difficult language, how it expands your mind and opens up all sorts of opportunities, and that did. And I ended up graduating in Chinese languages, going back and studying in mainland China, and then going on for an MBA. And that led me to WordPerfect, which I took advantage of all the technical training I could while I was there. And that led me to a little startup here locally, at the time called United Education Centers, or UEC. And then later on, we became Test Out Corporation. And that ended up being a 23-year journey for me, which really established my skills in learning and experience in helping grow a small company into a larger organization. And then ultimately that led me to Smarty, which is I would consider the thought that comes to mind is Mr. Holland's opus, where it's just one of the greatest opportunities I've had. It's the funnest. It's fun to do it all over again, but with some understanding and knowledge behind me.
That's great. You know, I'm always impressed by people in your church who go on missions, and how profound for some those missions are and how it shaped their lives. I've got friends here in Central California who are members of your church, and lawyers that I've known for many, many years. And we talk about that. And I think that is truly a life-changing experience for a lot of young people, which is probably why the church does it. Besides,
without a doubt. I mean, you think about it, you look at different countries around the world that require, military service at those young ages, and you take people at the most formative point in their lives at 18, 19 years old, and then you go put them somewhere in the world. And in our case, now just go serve other people. Get out of yourself,
right,
and go serve other people. And by the way, you're going to learn a new culture. You're going to learn language. It's a great foundation for life.
It really is. So tell us a little bit about Smarty. I went to the website today and looked at it, but I'd like to. What was the term? Location data verification. Was that the term that you guys used?
Location data intelligence.
There you go.
Yeah. Location data intelligence. I think it's a great term. But we basically, in a nutshell, our core service, our core product that we offer is address verification or validation. So two good examples of that would be if you go to check out of an online store and you put your address in, and it comes up and it says, "Oh, do you mean this?" And it's a cleaned up, shippable address. That's our service. And so it's a software as a service.
So I use ShipStation. So if I go to ShipStation, put in the address, it says down the little red line, address verified. That's the kind of stuff.
If it's If it's correct, it's probably ours. If it's not, maybe it might be somebody else's, service that does that.
Right.
But yeah, no, and then but we go beyond that. We call it address. So anything that begins or starts with an address, we can solve a lot of problems, a lot of issues for companies. So we can do address verification and quality for US and international. We can do geocoding, so very accurate, hyper accurate longitude, latitude, reverse geocoding, address enrichment, all sorts of metadata we can give on an address, such as voting district, school districts, tax districts. We can give property attributes and all sorts of other data sets, like our master address file. Some people can subscribe to our master address file, which has, I think right now, about 20 million more addresses than even the USPS does. So
Really?
yeah.
How do you accumulate that data?
Oh, many different sources. We source a lot, but we also verify, and we've just been in this business for over 10 plus years. We have an amazing amount of data sources at our fingertips.
So you've been with the company, I think, since 2019, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the January of 2019. So just over 4 years.
What unique skills do you bring to Smarty to help it succeed as a CEO? And imagine now that we're talking, our audience is CEOs, and so they're interested in learning from you. What is it that's unique about you that you bring to the company?
It's interesting. There's all sorts of great studies and great articles in the Harvard Business Review, and is the first one I really read that dealt with this one subject. But the importance of having that secondhand person, that person that can be with you in the journey. For a lot of these entrepreneurs, it's good to find somebody that's maybe different, thinks a little bit different than yourself, kind of brings a different perspective, can challenge the person in a good way. And then is probably more inclined, like myself, to want to add structure to the organization so that it can build and grow and withstand some of the weight that comes on to it over time. So you're building a good foundation. With me, again, 25, 6, 7 years of business experience coming into this small organization at the time of about 20, 25 people. And then kind of knowing what it takes and having felt some of the pain of growing a small business into something larger, just having been there and done that and being interested in building a firm foundation to this organization to allow for the growth, that's probably the skill set that I bring in to Smarty. It was different, thinking differently than an entrepreneur, but very intrapreneur in myself, wanting to figure things out. But then having been there and done it.
Lots of experience. Smarty's unique in, well, I wouldn't say unique, but it's unusual in that your growth has come, the company's growth has come totally self-funded. How do you manage that?
Well, just a very disciplined owner and founder. He is very disciplined in his own personal life, and his decisions have basically allowed us to have the funds we need to grow and to move. And we've been very, with that, knowing that that we are the sole source of that, it makes you want to make better decisions. You're forced to, yeah, you live within your means, but grow in ways that you really feel will affect the long-term health of the organization. And then keeping in mind that you're building something, I like to use the term enduring organization, building something that has a long-term value to it. Because the owner is not in it for the short-term gain. He's not just
the typical,
and that's a lovely thing to have. Yeah, that's a lovely environment to be in, where you're not trying to live up to somebody else's expectations outside of the organization.
Yeah, I'm a vice president of a small startup in Southern California. We're the same thing. We're totally self-funded, and it takes a lot of pressure off.
It does. It does.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's amazing that you've been able to do that. I would imagine that when you're deciding how you're going to grow, and you've got a pot of capital to deal with, and you've got to really be smart about how you're budgeting out your capital expenses and how you're going to allocate money for growth, and do a lot of research to make sure that the money you're investing, the self-funded money you've generated, the profits you've generated, retained earnings, are going to be put to good use. That seems like it would take a lot of discipline.
It does. And but again, luckily the company was extremely or very, very healthy for many, many years. And so it allowed him to have that type of funds available to him. And so when the time came and we started to add more people to the team and uh, grow the company in the way it should, it's there. It's available to us. And we try to be very judicious about it,
Right.
but yet it's time. It's time to grow. Since I've been here, we've had our revenues are over 3 times at least of what they were when I got here, and the number of people that we have is well over 3 times that. So
That's
it's
that's in like 3 years, 3 or 4 years.
yes.
That's impressive. I noticed that the company values were come from the Arbinger Institute, which I'm familiar with. Not many people have heard about that, but tell me a little about that. How their work in leadership has influenced you and your leadership of the company.
Well, you're familiar with it, and if what's fascinating about the Arbinger is, if I put it in a nutshell, it's actually just reminding us to see people as people, to see the humanity in other people. Yes, you're going to be quick to judge and all those other things like that, but if you just step back and just remember that that's a person, and then to realize that you have an impact for good or bad on that individual. So thinking outside of yourself with an outward mindset, they call it, and seeing the humanity in other people. And so having that, which is interesting with Smarty, because this was a book that this leadership and self-deception was a book that our founder and CEO Jonathan Oliver had come across back in 2009. And so when he kind of split off from previous partners or whatever and founded Smarty Streets as we know it, well, Smarty today, but Smarty Streets back then in 2011, everybody started to get trained on Arbinger. So it's very unique to find a business that from day one is a foundational principle to the whole organization. And I can't tell you how much of a breath of fresh air that is, how by having that as a driver of who we hire, can they, if anybody's ever had a moment of seeing outside of themselves and thinking of somebody else, then you'll buy into these principles. And it's a common language of when you have diversity and all sorts of social issues or political issues or religious issues, you name it, we can speak on with a common language, and it breaks down all sorts of barriers and allows us to just work together really, really well.
Well, I think the point you make is it's very rare to see a company, that's based on the Arbinger Institute values, because what they do is powerful work, and they're not particularly well known. And that's why it caught my eye. So, oh, this is interesting. But I'm also impressed that it guides your hiring and recruiting philosophy, how you interact with each other. So you're really putting the principles into play every single day, and that's impressive.
Yeah, from day one, we encourage the new employees to go and meet with other employees and get to know them for a few minutes. And so, yeah, very collaborative.
So this show is called Listening with Leaders, and that's because I'm really into listening. And it turns out that you are too. Tell us about how important listening is in both your professional work, your business work, and also in your personal life.
You know, Stephen Covey was brilliant in so many ways, and I think it's his fifth habit or something like that, which is
28 pages.
Yeah, seek first to understand, right? And I think that, and by the Arbinger principles and just living life, I've found that I do really well one-on-one with individuals, and I'm not one that walks into a room and will take over a whole room and be the life of the party. But if I sit down next to somebody on a plane, or if I'm here at the office, or if somebody wants to come talk with me, it's not hard for me to get to know somebody in a short period of time. And it just takes a couple of questions of where are you from? Tell me a little bit of, oh, your work is this. And you simply say something like that, and all of a sudden you've got a connection. And people are fascinating. And my children know that if I'm standing in a line at a grocery store or a gas station, and somebody in front of me has green or purple or blue hair and tattoos everywhere, and nose ring, I mean, you name it, leather jackets, or whatever the stereotype you want to put out there, I'm going to say something like, oh, hey, you nailed that shade of green. I just, what, you got to tell me that. And within a minute, you are having a personal conversation with somebody that you wouldn't be able to have if you just didn't get outside of yourself for a moment.
Where do you think you picked that skill up? This is a very unusual skill that you have.
I don't know.
You know.
My kids will just say I'm weird. But no, I think it's a culmination of, like I said, my background, my upbringing, and then being in many different places, having to get to know new people all the time, and that, I think that just stuck with me. And then in my personality, I tend to enjoy life and enjoy people.
What would you say to people, C-level people, about the importance of listening in your role as president and chief operating officer of Smarty?
I'll tell you, when I came into Smarty, there was, if I would have come in guns a-blazing and telling people what to do, that would have lasted a very short period of time. I needed to come in, understand, get to know the culture. I needed to know where they were and who I was dealing with, and the individuals. And then over time, it became apparent the better way we should possibly do things, how the reorganization of the company should look. It became apparent. It was a sort of a natural, organic way of doing it, as opposed to forcing the issue. And I think with listening, your understanding grows. I don't know if you've ever heard of the assessment Strength Finders 2.0 or that. Yeah.
Yes, Gallup.
Okay. My number one strength is harmony.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's and it probably shows in how I've approached business and life, is that I would much rather find common ground so that we can take steps forward, as opposed to standoffs. The political world out there just drives me nuts, is when you get such polarization. When in my head I'm just thinking, what? Why? That's so dumb. Why don't you just sit down and have a conversation, and then we move forward, with something.
We can agree to disagree, but we can respect each other, and we can find far more in common than what separates us.
The masters, like, and okay, I don't want to offend a lot of people, but you look at how Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill were able to converse and carry on relationships on different sides of the aisle. And I look to those, and I congratulate people who can do that. Right. Because we need to move forward. The whole idea is let's move forward, let's grow, let's develop, let's. Right. But if we have to stand our ground so hard, then.
Yeah, I teach people how to have a polarized, how to have a calm conversation with the politically polarized. And it's 4 questions.
You're a very patient person, I would imagine.
Well, my job, I'm a sophisticated peacemaker, right? So
yeah,
I deal with conflict all the time. And I got to thinking about, how can we listen to the politically polarized in a way that creates a transformative conversation, not a difficult conversation. And of course,
I think that just starts with listening, right?
That's right.
I mean,
that's the first thing. You have to be willing to listen, and you can't have an agenda, and you have to be in a place where you do not want to persuade somebody else to the righteousness of your cause. You truly want to learn what their perspective is. And
even if somebody is attacking you.
That's right.
Even if somebody is aggressively attacking you, to be able to just stop, take that deep breath, let the lump in your throat, go away, but just take a breath and listen and ask yourself, well, is there any truth in that?
That's right.
So just being able to one of the things I've talked about before is don't be afraid to question yourself and question your decisions and question things along the way. Every day, some new event's going to happen. Something's going to happen in the economy. Something's going to change in your customer set. You've got to step back and just listen. And sometimes, as a CEO, you're going to be very driven. You're going to be very, very aggressive in everything. That's why you're a CEO. That's why you're a founder. That's why your personality is entrepreneurial. It's a fantastic way to think. Well, bring people in like myself to kind of be on the side that understand your role, but will drive other things that you're not seeing.
Right. I mean, I think you make a really good point. If you're have the personality type as an entrepreneur or a founder or a CEO, and you're really focused strategically on what you're trying to do, then you should bring somebody in as a COO who complements that, but maybe understands how to look at people in a different way, and can soften your approach and balance you out. I think that's what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Or if you're more of an introverted CEO or somebody like that, then you find somebody that's a little bit more driven, but yet will still understand your position. Never stepping over the CEO.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it's a great business philosophy. Well, we're kind of getting to the end of our 30 minutes. I don't want to take up any more time, but I have one more question for you. It's the question I always ask at the end. It's a little more personal. So Doug, what is the one thing that we would not know about you unless you revealed it to us?
Oh, wow. Okay, you put me on the spot there. This is a little bit
you've got such a diverse background. I'm sure there's something out there that we would never guess about you unless you revealed it.
I probably, if I gave myself a minute or two, even at my advanced age in life, I could probably pull a handstand on a chair over here or something like that, and hold on or whatever to something and be able to hold a handstand.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty.
Yeah. and I beat my son in wrestling over the weekend, so I tend to. Okay, that's something crazy. I don't know. But, I love classical novels too. I love Dickens and those types of things. I love a good variety of classical literature and stuff.
I was an English literature major at Dartmouth, so we have that in common.
There we go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I really appreciated the conversation.
Well, thank you, Doug.